SlikRok Productions, and today I want to talk about a problem that each and every one of us has experienced. And honestly, if you haven't owned your razor long enough. The drive shafts and the carrier bearings in these machines factory are just garbage. So the factory carrier bearing has got a rubber bushing in it. It has a lot of motion in it. It vibrates. You end up bending your drive shafts. You rip the bearings out. They make a lot of racket, a lot of noise. So Sandcraft came out with a bearing some time ago, and that alleviated most of that. But these guys have taken it up about 20 notches here. So this is their complete drivetrain solutions kit. I want to talk about each one of these pieces, but I want to start with the drive shafts. These drive shafts are 1 3/4 inch. They're 0.95 wall. They're 3 times stronger than a stock shaft is. But furthermore, the factory shafts are meant for 2,000 RPMs. That's what they're rated for. And so your drive shaft hits about 2,000 RPMs at 40 miles per hour. These are rated for over 6,000 RPMs. So you'd have to do about 120 to 140 miles an hour to exceed. You're not going to do that. The U-joints in these are actual automotive U-joints. And so they're meant for this kind of abuse. They're meant to be in this kind of an application. The U-joints that are in the factory Polaris drive shafts, they're PTO drive shafts. They're something you're going to find in a tiller or a lawnmower. They're not serviceable, they're not strong, and they're not meant for this kind of torque, and this is why they fail. The yokes on these are greasable, and they're a hell of a lot bigger. They're a lot stronger than the factory ones are. So this is a really good upgrade to get rid of that problem. The bearings that they have on these, the new carrier bearings, they have a new design that just came out. These are self-aligning. They're stronger than the last ones. They're really cool, and the application is a lot easier to install. So that's really cool in itself. Then this is their new motor mount. And so they've actually changed the Polaris motor mount, the design of it, and it actually aligns, so it takes the pressure off the drive shaft, so it keeps the degree angle proper. So that'll alleviate a lot of problems in itself. And then the differential. So you can take your factory differential and you can mail that to them, and they do a complete rebuild on them. So they upgrade the armature plates, they do the sprag, they do a new dowel pin in them, they put new bearings, new seals. The seals are better, they're rated for a higher temperature. So this is a complete kit to get rid of all your vibrations, all the howling, to get rid of the problems with the carrier bearing, to get rid of the problems with the drive shafts. This thing does it all in one whack. So there's some really good ingenuity here. I'm really excited to put it in our machines. So you can check these guys out at sandcraftmotorsports.com. Kind of get the pricing on this. It's all very affordable, and this is a really good upgrade. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to put these kits in all 3 of our machines. We're going to do that tomorrow. We're going to do an installation video on these, kind of show you the tricks that we'll learn, taking them in and out if you want to do this by yourself. It's really not a very hard thing to do, but we'll walk you through step by step, and every one of us has had this problem. This is probably problem number 1 for everybody in their razors. And so I really urge you to get on these guys' websites. This is a great company, and they make great quality products. They need no introduction from us. We all know who they are. We know what to expect from these guys. So we'll get these all installed, and then we're going to go to Moab next week, and we're going to beat the hell out of them. We've been bending a lot of drive shafts with our big tire cars. It puts a lot of torque on them, and I'm pretty sure this is going to alleviate the problem, and we'll certainly do a review on that. Here you can see the difference in the drive shafts. This is the Sandcraft drive shaft. This is a factory Polaris drive shaft. This thing is a lot thicker. It's a lot thicker gauge steel. It's a lot bigger. It's a lot more heavy duty. This is a heavy duty application here. But the Polaris one here, this is the factory carrier bearing in it. These things are rubber, and so you can see the motion they have in them. And so what happens is that rubber bushing starts wearing out. It allows the drive shaft to wobble in there. It bends your drive shafts. It rips the bearings out. They make a lot of racket. And so Sandcraft's bearing here is self-aligning, but it's solid. So once you get your drive shaft back in, we'll show you how to put it in place, but it self-aligns. The reason Polaris does this is because their drive shaft angles are off a little bit, and so it allows it to get a little play when you put it under a torque load. Not necessary with this. These guys have done all the calculations, they've done all the research, they know what the angle should be, and so all the components are with this kit to fix that problem entirely. So there's no more whining, no more bending drive shafts, no more blowing out carrier bearings. And this drive shaft here was actually in my car. This is the Politician. This thing is crooked as can be. It's got literally 9 different bends in it. I mean, this thing is ridiculous. This thing vibrated really bad. But when they start vibrating on like that, they pay a toll on your transmission, your carrier bearings, all the parts in your cars take a beating with this. So you can take these down to a shop, and they'll straighten them for you. But once you've straightened them, they're weak and they're going to rebend anyway. Some guys cut them off. They put new DOM on them, but you're not phasing them that way, and you still end up with an inferior U-joint, and you end up with an inferior yoke. Once again, these are automotive U-joints in these. These are made for this application. These are PTOs, so this eliminates more than one problem here. You're eliminating a lot of problems with one good system. So we pulled out a couple of diffs out of our cars and we mailed them off to Sandcraft. You can mail these down and these guys will completely rebuild them with your system here. And so basically what they'll do here, this was out of a 15, and so this had a plastic sprag in it. They're garbage, and they put the upgraded sprag in them, but they also do the armature plates in them. They put new dowel pins in them. They put new bearings in them. They put seals in them. The seals are temperature rated. They're a lot better seal, and they also adjust the backlash in them. So you know, that's a really important thing when you're rebuilding things that a lot of guys don't do. So when you get this thing back from them, it's completely rebuilt, and when it says Sandcraft certified on the side of it, you know you have a quality product from those boys. We've installed our differential back into the car, and Sandcraft has got an alignment tool or alignment kit for your differential. So what it is an aluminum tapered shim that goes on the back side of your differential. There's 4 bolts that hold it on, and then there's a plastic one in the front that's a lot smaller. So what this does is it actually lifts the differential up and it changes it a couple of degrees to take a little more pressure off of that front drive shaft. So it's in the instruction manual when you get it. It's clearly indicated. It's really easy to put that together. But every few degrees that you can come positive with that and get the bind off of it, the less vibration you have and the less wear on your joints you're going to have. Factory in these machines, your front drive shaft is held in with a pin on the front, a cold pin you got to punch back out. The carrier bushing is stationary, and then on the back you have a slide yoke on the back of your transmission. And so once you take these out, the new system doesn't have a pin in the front. It's got a bolt that goes through it. Obviously the carrier bearing is stationary and the rear still slides on the yoke. So the instructions tell you to mount the front drive shaft first, and we were unable to do that. We found it was a lot easier because the collar slides farther back on the back, and so we put the rear drive shaft in first, and then we put the front drive shaft in. We put the bearing in place, and then we slide the front shaft back on. So there's more, all the motion comes from the back forward. It doesn't move on the front. And so we were able to get them in a lot easier starting from the back and working forward. Now all these machines are a little bit different, the ears and stuff on them. The collars are a little different on the yokes. There's a reason they put that in the instructions. I'm not quite sure what that is. You might have better luck that way. Both of the machines that I've done so far have been thousands. The turbo is the same way. We actually did one of those earlier. But be that as it may, we had a little easier luck on the back, putting the rear shaft on first and working our way forward. So the bearing in this mounts a little bit different. So let's get under there and take a look at that next. So the mounting process of this is completely backwards from everything else. Every bearing in the factory one bolts on top of this bracket here. The holes on the top here are threaded. They bolt from the top down. So this one, the billet bracket here, bolts on the bottom. So you run this bolt through the bottom. This one you run through the threads at the top, put a nut on the bottom, run it all the way down tight, and then tighten this bolt back up here. Make sure you have your washers on here so it doesn't collapse the rubber bushings. Once you have that on, you can put your drive shaft in place. Do the front drive shaft to get it set solid because this is floating at this time. And your new bearing here that is self-aligning, you just align it up with your holes here, and then it's got new bolts to put in here, and make sure you put Loctite on these. So the last piece to the complete drivetrain solutions from Sandcraft is a new motor mount here. So the factory motor mount sits a little nose heavy in the front, and so it puts a pretty good degree on the drive shaft. And so they've come up with a new motor mount. It's a factory replacement. It's got new mounts on it all together. And so it's pretty easy to install. One of the best tricks to do is the factory plate where it bolts onto the transmission, you leave in. So you're just basically taking the motor mount. You can stick a pry bar in and just kind of hold the motor up, put it right in. It goes in smooth as silk. It's a few new bolts. It goes in real easy. But this is just one of those things that those guys have done. They're trying to get every degree they can so that it properly aligns the drivetrain so you don't get any vibration out of it whatsoever. So it runs just super smooth at all RPMs and all speeds. It's pretty impressive. So the installation process was really quite simple. We've had aftermarket carrier bearings where we've replaced just the bearing. It's taken us 4 and 5 hours to get them in and out. They're quite difficult, but this whole system took about 2 hours to put in. It's a lot easier to do the whole thing as opposed to just that section of it. One thing you need to be aware of if you have aftermarket skid plates especially, There's grease zerks on the U-joints, there's grease zerks on the yokes, and on the carrier bearing, so make sure you get it greased before you put it all back together. The machining on everything was absolutely perfect. All the splines were perfect, everything fit together tight, there was no slop in anything. Even the hole in the front of the drive shaft where the coal pin used to be, the machining was perfect, and the bolt slides right through. Everything is tight, and it's really well made. The only inconsistency that we came across is this machine's a 17 and we have a 16 turbo car, and the cross members in them are a little bit different. The instructions tell you for the two carrier bolts to run them through the threads and then to put nuts and washers on the bottom of them coming up. On these two cars there was a little less room, and we ran one bolt on one side through the bottom up through the threads and then put a nut on the top of it, but the instructions do tell you to go the other way. Also, we got another differential kit in today that only had one alignment shim in it. We call it Sandcraft, and they're going to one shim. They figured out the exact degree in it, so they eliminated having two. You only have one shim to replace the angle, so that'll even take a little more time off the installation process. So we'll look forward to that in the next one we do. But we're going to take these things down to Moab tomorrow. We put 35-inch sticky tires on these cars. I'm going down with the intention of bending a drive shaft. I'm going to torque load it. I'm going to put it through hell. I'm going to absolutely abuse it and try to bend one of these drive shafts. We've bent so many drive shafts with our big tire cars. We've broke so many bearings. This has been a big problem. I know it is for a lot of you guys out there too, but this has been a huge problem for us, and I'm really hoping this is the fix. So while we're down there, we're going to do a review on this, and I'll let you know if you bend one. So if you're looking to replace your drive shaft, your carrier bearing, or any of these components, you're going to want to watch that review, and we'll see if we can break them.